Hi, I'm Doug Gould from Worship MD, and I'm here for PreSonus today. We're going to do a webinar on how to do live stream worship audio. Some of you out there are struggling with getting your audio to be better, and later on in the program, we're going to have Ray Tantzen with us to give us some real how-to tips and tricks and techniques to make your audio better for your live stream. But before we get into that, I just want to introduce you to my friend Richard Gaspard from PreSonus. He's a product specialist here, and he's got a very diverse background, and especially from a church perspective, which many of the guys at PreSonus are church guys too. But I got Richard here, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about his background and how diverse his experiences are, and show you some things about what he's been doing and what he's been challenged with lately. So,
Well, I've been with PreSonus for about a year, and for that, a couple of years before that, I was doing a lot of church consulting, helping pastors just achieve their goals in the media realm. For about 14 years, I was the media director of a large church just about an hour west of here. And then before that, I worked at a film production company for a while, and then I was chief audio engineer at a very large television ministry. And I'm also a musician, bass player, singer, worship leader. My wife's a worship leader as well. And my wife and I actually travel and we speak at churches. So I've been able to have the fortunate instance that I've been able to do things kind of on all sides of the aisle, so to speak. I've done things on stage, but then also back, in the booth, but then also in the tech world and video and all of that.
wow. So broadcast was one of your experiences for a large Christian ministry. And in the days of TV, you'd have to create mixes. Nowadays, we have churches asking lots of questions. How do we get into this type of realm? And live streaming has become more affordable, so many churches are considering that, but many churches don't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
And those who do are struggling with even the video or the audio aspects of it. So what'd you say to them?
Well, back in the 90s when I was at that television production facility, it would cost, millions of dollars to have that kind of facility, and then hundreds of thousands of dollars for a good audio system. Even working at the church, I still spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And then you're talking about making a television show and then putting it on the air. But now, with the advent of streaming, actually as late as just maybe 3 years ago, it would cost $400 or $500 a month for a streaming service, which is still a lot cheaper than broadcast television. Sure. But now with the advent of YouTube Live, IGTV, Facebook Live, which is the big one, it's virtually free. And so churches now have the opportunity to take what they do and put that on their social media accounts. Mm-hmm. And that's been a great thing, but there have been some challenges because, we don't have necessarily the budget to go and spend all that money on large frame broadcast consoles or things like that. And so, the immediate thing that they try to do is just take a PA feed and put that in to their broadcast mix, which, if that's all you can do, that's all you can do. But it's actually the least optimal way to do things. And as you said, Ray is going to be here in a little bit later on, and he's going to talk about some solutions that PreSonus offers and kind of why that PA mix thing isn't the right thing to do. And then we're going to talk about things that PreSonus does that no other manufacturer does in our price point, and certainly price points 3 times that of ours. But, some things to consider when you're talking about doing live stream mix. For me, I think about, I always want to think about why do we do the things we do. Right. And, obviously there are things that are really obvious, the sick and the shut-ins, people who can't come to your services. That's really important. But then, we don't like to talk about the word marketing in the church world, but it's really marketing. If I invite you to my service and you've never been to my church, 30 years ago, you would have to just take it at face value that my church is great and you want to be there. But now you would go check out my church's website. You would go check out my church's social media accounts, specifically our Facebook.
Right.
And that streaming feed is your first taste, touch, smell.
My impression.
Yeah, and so we want that to be a good impression. And so good audio is a big part of that. We can have great video, but if the audio is terrible, then no one's going to stay with it. Or if we can have okay video with great audio, people will tend to want to stick with it more often. Right. But another thing to consider, and this is something I think about a lot, is the message that we're presenting. This might be our only opportunity to meet someone where they are, and we've got to do it right.
Yeah.
Who we're doing it for and why we're doing it. This could be that person's moment to change, and we've got to put our best foot forward. We've got to do it with excellence. Yeah. And so, like I said, Ray he's gonna talk about some solutions that we offer, that we can do it better than anyone else. And we just want to be able to equip your guys and people watching with that ability to do the very best that they can.
Right. Yeah, I mean, faith comes by hearing, right? I mean, we walk by faith, not by sight. So the video's got to be good, but the audio, that's really critical. So we're going to talk to Ray a little bit, but right now we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to look at this video from Calvary Chapel in Austin, who's just installed a brand new PreSonus ecosystem, and they want to show you how excited they are about having it. So we'll see you in a few.
I wear a lot of hats, but my main role is media and music pastor. You know, the whole reason we brought PreSonus in was that the musicians could actually hear themselves and leading people in worship when the band isn't jiving, when they're not together, when they're not gelling, they can't lead well. Issues that we were having with the system that we were on, one of them, I mean, it was huge. And one of the main reasons that we went with PreSonus is because somebody can now walk into the booth and they don't see this big behemoth of an analog board that's gonna freak them out. They see this nice little compact, pretty little lights on it, and it's easy to use. You know, it's now something that they can go up to and feel confident with. Also, just audio quality, going digital just made sense. Taking it down just to a single Ethernet cable and running that to your stage, to the rest of the Studio Live ecosystem is brilliant. You know, it's so simple to set up. Most of a rehearsal that we would do would consist of trying to get a monitor mix. We would do a little bit of the house, but majority of it was spent yelling back and forth from the stage to the sound booth. Contrast that with putting in a Studio Live 32 in the entire Studio Live ecosystem. It's brilliant. It took hardly any time at all, and we were up and rehearsing. Todd, as a drummer, you know, he's got to keep the band together with the bass player. Today, he came back twice to the sound booth and shook my hand. I mean, he was literally shaking with joy, and he did this like little dance up the aisle, just like, I can't believe it, it just sounds so good. And I was like, that's a Todd I haven't seen. So it's a totally different person. He's so excited about it. A church community's giving to the church and how the church is charged to steward and know that we've stewarded those funds well. It's huge. Pray. You know, before we touch anything, we're gonna pray for provision. PreSonus was perfect for that for us. Being able to work directly with them has helped tremendously. They explained things back and forth with us when we had questions. So we felt really good jumping in full on with them when the time came.
So we're back, and you may have noticed that my partner has changed. I have with me the famous, if you've seen a lot of PreSonus videos, Senior Product Manager for PreSonus, Mr. Ray Tantzen.
Hello.
Who also happens to be a volunteer sound tech at his church. Mm-hmm. So again, some of the products that PreSonus is developing for us are coming straight from this guy who has experience in the church and in the realm of engineering. So what a combination of skills. And
yeah, it provides a lot of really good experience and feedback from the people who are actually using it day to day. So at our church, at Struma Ascension, I actually am fortunate enough to be able to use the church as a beta site. So we test a lot of the new products there. We have a complete Studio Live Series 3 ecosystem installed there. And so for today, I actually was able to use the SD card recording on the mixer to do a multi-track recording of our services. So we have some worship songs that we can pull up and show some of the stuff of how you can utilize whatever the tools are that you have available to improve the sound quality of your live stream.
Great. So what we're going to listen to first is a live mix that you've done on the PreSonus, on the SD card. I just want to say, if somebody doesn't have a PreSonus and they're doing a live stream mix, maybe we can go into some of those things too that we can show, maybe just with an aux mix, maybe what you can add to it to make it better. But with the PreSonus ecosystem like you have, there are a world of things you can do that are probably way beyond what maybe even some of the competition has to offer. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can use whatever tools you have. Of course, with the PreSonus ecosystem, there's several different methods that you can utilize for improving your live stream. Your live stream is basically, it's your broadcast, right? So, if you think of it like your broadcast mix, you can use a whole separate mixer for that. You can use a smaller mixer and do submixes. And if your mixer is equipped with it, like the Studio Live Series 3 is, you can use matrix mixes as well. So we'll show a few of the different ways how to do that. Before we do that, though, let's take a look. I know that earlier you and Richard were talking about just the quality that you get right off of the
right.
two mix off the mixer.
Why
right?
does that not sound so great?
Yeah. So here we have this is the mix that's right off the board. So when you do a multi-track recording, use our integrated capture on the SD card or capture running on a computer, it actually saves the entire mix of the mixer. So when I loaded this session up, I could choose to recall that mix. So this is the exact mix that we have going on at the church. Now, again, this is based off of what we've mixed for the room, right? So.
Sing this together, hark the heavenly angels sing.
All right, so you get an idea of that. So if you're just coming right off the two mix of your mixer, that's what's going out to the world. Right. So you're hearing a few different things on there. I mean, mostly what you're hearing is vocals. You're hearing a lot of piano in there and acoustic guitar, right? So
the things that you'd have to acoustically reinforce
exactly.
are going to be more heard than things that don't need to be reinforced.
That's right. That's right. So you're not hearing a lot of things like the drums, right? Because they're very loud in the room. You don't have to do as much with them. And to make matters even worse, we happened to that day have a cabling issue with one of the speakers that we had, and so we ended up panning almost everything slightly to the left to fix the balance in the room. Wow. And so if you're listening at home, through your computer or your TV, then it's going to be really weird. And so it's not the greatest experience. So how can we fix that?
Okay.
All right. So the easiest way is really just have a whole separate mixer. And so with the Studio Live Series 3 ecosystem, whether you're using the console mixer or a rack mixer, you can connect the mixers up using the AVB network and get all of the exact same inputs, whether they're coming locally from the mixer itself, or the main front of house mixer, or from stage boxes using the NSB stage boxes. You can get all of those individual channels to multiple mixers at once. So a front of house mixer, a monitor mixer, and in this case, what we'll talk about, a broadcast mixer, a mixer specifically for mixing for the live stream. So in this example, I'm just going to use the rack mixer. It's a great option if you are on a budget or have a limited space. The rack mixer, both the 24R and the 32R, are a full 32 channel mixer. So if you're running any of the mixers, you can still get all of the channels into that. So let's take a look over here at the rack mixer, and I'll show real briefly how to set that up. So this is my rack mixer in UC Surface. If I just go into my settings here into my network, I can go to my AVB inputs. And I'm just going to select here, I can see my Studio Live 24 AVB sends. So I'm just going to take each of those and I'm going to bring them straight into the mixer. I'll just stop there. We only need the 32 channels in this situation. So, and then I'll jump over to my digital patching, and I want to change all my input source here from analog to network. So I'll just go through and I select that for all of the channels. So now what that means is when I go back to my mixer, all of my channels, instead of being sourced from the local inputs, are being sourced from the network, which means that they're coming from this mixer here. So if I go ahead and hit play, now you'll see I've got all of the playback tracks that are happening right now at my front of house mixer are coming through on the rack mixer, which in this case is my broadcast mixer. Mm-hmm. So from here, it's a whole separate mixer. You can do whatever you want. Right. So you have all of the fat channel processing individually, completely separate from what you're doing at front of house. So you don't need to do things like cut out certain frequencies in the vocals to make sure you're not getting feedback and things like that, right? You have all of your own effects for reverbs, delays, however you want to do that stuff, and your own separate processing on the main mix. That's going to be the EQ dynamics. You know, one thing, you know, if you take a look at the main mix of our recording, you know, the main mix EQ is really crazy, and that's because we're compensating for the room. For the room, you know, we tuned the system for the room, and so by having a completely separate mixer, we can tune it for whatever it is you're going to be broadcasting out to.
So I would expect then that you'd want that mixer in a separate place outside of the room, or to be isolated from what's happening in the room at least, right?
That's right, yeah. With this situation, when you have a completely separate mixer, that really is going to be the best scenario, is to be in a different location. That way you can have either headphones or speakers, preferably speakers, and you're mixing live at the same time that the front of house engineer is mixing live. And so you have all of that. The other great thing is you can utilize all of the fat channel parameters with the limiter, the compressor, to really dial in the range of the dynamics for your broadcast mix. I know it's really popular these days. It's a live stream, right? Mm-hmm. And so depending on the format of your live stream, you know, there's different ranges you want to make sure that your signal is on. So you're optimizing for that format.
Also, probably would add some crowd mics, ambient mics, audience mics.
Yeah, great point. So on our recording, when I played back, it doesn't have any of that, right? Because it's the mix that we have from front of house. But because our worship team is predominantly on in-ears, not all of them, but most on in-ears using the ear mixes, we do have crowd mics, so we can have ambience in their ears.
So you can repurpose the ambient in-ear mics for your audience mics.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so if I just page over to our second layer on the mixer here, you'll see we've got two room mics here, and I can bring those up in the mix. And that can be used for broadcast and without having it come into the front of house, because you know you're not going to bring that in the front of house. All right, so that's, you know, without going through and actually setting up a mix and going, you know, down that rabbit hole. Basically, that's how you would do it with a separate mixer. Yeah, and so just one-to-one, just bring the tracks in, and it works completely independently.
Technique number 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all right, maybe you don't have a budget, or maybe you don't have the space to add a second mixer. Okay. Well, one thing you can do is utilize our ear mixes, or you know the ear mix unit. It's basically, we're just using it as a smaller mixer. Yeah, because that's what it is. It's a monitor mixer, and that's how it operates, its intended function. But really, it's just a 16-channel mixer. And so another thing that you can do is you can set up submixes of things to send out 16 tracks that can go to a smaller mixer, submixer, that you then at least you have some additional control over what's going on for your broadcast.
So if I have 8 channels of drums, I'll just send a submix of a stereo pair, or maybe even one channel of drums altogether.
Exactly. Yep. And in fact, that's what we've done here. If we take a look, I've got a drum mix over here on a couple of the flex mixes. You know, I've changed them. We've got aux sends here, and that way, you know, for this particular situation, it's because we have ear mixes and we need it separated out, so we have room for all the individual tracks. But yeah, so what you can do is you set up whatever submixes you want, and then you go into your audio routing here, and on your digital patching, you can go into your AVB sends, and you can choose what you want to send out. Right. So, you know, all of the available sources are going to be there. So that's all of your individual channels, your auxiliary inputs, tape input, talkbacks, all of your flex mixes, right? And even your effects returns, submixes, and main mix and solo. So all of that's available to send out onto the AVB network. And so you choose the 16 things you want to send out, and then once you've done that, you'll go in to set up the ear mix, and it's really just as easy as here's an ear mix. I can choose the sources I want to go to it. So we'll send that, we hit apply, and that's now going to send those AVB channels to the ear mix unit. And as you can see, there's an apply and apply all. Sure. So if you're doing a simple setup, you can send the same 16 channels to all the ear mixes you have, but each ear mix can receive its own dedicated 2 streams. So your broadcast ear mix, if you're using it that way, can receive different channels and mixes than what your talent on stage would be using.
Exactly, that's so nice. And this has EQ on every channel. It has dynamics, or a compressor and limiter on not only the individuals, but the master.
That's right.
You have what for outputs on the back of this?
Yeah, so you have a headphone output. So if you were using this as a broadcast mixer, you'd use the headphones for yourself to dial in your mix. And then we have line outputs as well. Okay. So you just take the line outputs and take those out to whatever the device is that you're using for your streaming.
Okay. Wow, that's great.
And so yeah, same kind of a deal as with a separate mixer, but scaled down a little bit, right? So you don't have a compressor on every channel, but you do have a limiter on every channel and the main mix. You don't have a 4-band fully parametric EQ, but you do have a 3-band EQ. So it's scaled down depending on the size and budget and what you're trying to accomplish.
And what's nice too, Ray, it's still tactile. I still have controls that I can actually touch and manipulate. And some old school guys in churches I know are just still afraid of iPads and things and to use that way. So this is kind of nice. It's not intimidating, easy to understand.
And it's something that can just sit there in a fixed location. Really easy for volunteers who may not have experience or can get intimidated by this type of a setup when they walk into a mixer. You know, real simple and straightforward.
Right. Great. Technique number 3.
All right. So if you don't even have the space or the budget to add on to your system, or maybe you're starting with just a mixer and you plan to add on later. If you have a matrix mixing in your mixer, which the Studio Live Series 3 has matrix mixing, you can use a matrix mix to set up for your broadcast mix for your live stream.
Okay, how many of you know what a matrix is? I had an old Allen and Heath board, and it had a matrix in it. And it allowed me to take subgroups and maybe an additional input or two to add to the subgroups. So it was a mix of mixes, but very, very limited. And on this console, Ray, why don't you show us how our matrix mixing is different from that old school matrix?
Yeah, traditionally, especially in the analog world and with a lot of digital mixers as well, your matrix mix is a mix of mixes. So you usually will get your main mix and maybe some or all of your other mixes. So I've set up a couple of our flex mixes here as a matrix mix. And you'll see the way that the channels are laid out is going to be a little bit different on a matrix mix. So for starters, I'm going to have all of my flex mixes. These two are blank because that's the mix that I'm on. So you can't send a mix to itself. So all of my flex mixes, and I have my subgroups and my main mix. But then with the Studio Live Series 3, in addition to all of your mixes, you also have all of your individual channels. Wow. So you see my first 2 are starting here. I page over. Here's the rest of my channels. So I have individual channels available and all of my mixes available.
That's really different.
So this becomes really advantageous in this type of a scenario where you're doing a broadcast mix, because rather than just sending the main mix, so if all I were going to do is send the main mix, that is going to get me a step further, right? it's going to be better than just taking a mix off of the back. And that's because, you know, I showed you the EQ we had on that main mix for out, right? We don't want that EQ going out. So if all you had was the ability to turn the main mix into a matrix, you would at least avoid that last processing step and be able to do custom processing on the matrix mix output. Right. So you could have different EQ, different dynamics for that. So it is going to still be one step better. But with the Studio Live Series 3, you get several steps better. So I can start with my main mix and then supplement that with individual channels. So like we were mentioning earlier, the drums aren't as loud in the room, in the mix, because they're loud in the room. Right. Well, I can have my main mix here, and then I can start turning up my drums individually to supplement that. Right. And that's all going to be perfectly in time and correct with everything here. And then setting up the matrix so it's all post fader. So any moves that you make for front of house will follow in the matrix mix for the broadcast. And that's important because if you're bringing an instrument up for a solo or a vocalist up for a solo, you want that to follow in the broadcast mix. But because you do have a separate balance set up on your broadcast mix, it will sound better going out. So let's just do a quick example of how that would work, right? So here's just the main mix, right?
Wow.
Probably didn't even know the kick was there if all you were listening was the main mix.
I couldn't hear it before.
Yeah, I can bring my snare in. We've got some electric guitar or bass.
What a difference.
And so I haven't even gotten into setting up separate processing, but you can see how easy and how much of a difference just pushing up the faders in a matrix mix can have on the quality of the sound for your live stream and your broadcast mix.
That's crazy. So again, you could be in another room just with maybe an iPad, just getting matrix feeds to your device.
Absolutely.
Your live stream.
Yeah. So a few different ways of being able to handle doing a live mix for a broadcast, a live stream. Using the Studio Live Series 3, really simple and straightforward. You can utilize the AVB network, connect a whole separate mixer, and be able to completely manage everything independently. You can set up something like an ear mix as a sub-mixer and mix things down and then get that out independently. Or if you're just working on the same console, set up a matrix mix. And just like we did here, you can utilize the multi-track recording from Capture to be able to record a service and then set up your broadcast mix when the worship team isn't even there. So you don't have to bother everybody with that.
That's amazing. So many different ways to do it, so many easy ways to accomplish it. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back with Richard in a few minutes. So we're back, and I have with me Richard and Ray. So we're going to do a little follow-up here. You've learned some tips and techniques from Ray, and we've talked about a lot of ways that you can make your live stream worship audio better. But there's some other things we haven't touched on, and maybe you don't have this ecosystem. If you don't, I'd suggest going out and getting one. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about some things that you can do to maybe enhance your stream audio a little bit better. And you had some questions you wanted to answer? Or?
Yeah, people, you know, again, the questions are always coming up. How do I get my live stream to be better? And really, getting your live stream to be better, the questions the answers to those questions are kind of the same answers to How do I get good audio, period? And, you know, the one of the most important things to do is just to get it right at the source. So good miking technique, have the conversation with the worship pastor, with the pastor, in humility. We're not trying to bulldoze over anybody else. We want everybody to do their best. But, you know...
well, small things, just like, you know, changing out guitar strings, tuning the drums, tuning the piano, you know, making sure that all that stuff is good.
Right.
And making sure that the worship team can hear themselves well. You know, you're going to get a better performance out of the artists if they're comfortable and hear themselves well and the other bandmates well.
Yeah. That's right. So the source has to sound good, and then choosing the right microphone, which unfortunately many churches don't have choices of microphones. They might be using this particular mic for everything, even distant miking. Right. So if they want a little bit of a primer on miking, they can email me and I can send them a PDF on how to choose the right mic. Difference between a dynamic, a condenser, a ribbon, 3-to-1 rule, things like that they should know. Polar patterns are really important. You have monitors facing the wrong way and you're getting feedback. So I agree with you. And I think a lot of techs should really take it upon themselves to be responsible to teach the worship team in conjunction with the worship leader how to properly use a mic. Because the more consistent I can stay on mic, the better gain I'm going to get and the less feedback I'm going to get.
Yeah, we've all seen the speaker that comes up and holds the mic down here while they're talking like this, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you know, microphones, I tell this to people all the time, microphones don't hear the way the human ear hears. I can listen to you talk and drown out any background noise, but the microphone's going to pick that all up arbitrarily, and you know, we hear playback and we go, wow, that was so loud in the background. Right. We just ignored it when we first heard it, but the microphone can't do that.
Yeah,
and
it happens all the time with a worshiper who stands right in front of a drum set, you know, and he's using a condenser microphone, which are very sensitive. So does it mean I can't use that mic here? No, it just means you have to stand over there or put the drums over there, because that just became the best drum mic the church owns, right? So it starts exactly where you said. It starts at the source, and then the right mic choice, the right placement of the microphone.
Right. And then let's go to the opposite end of that spectrum, and let's go to the destination. We need to be constantly monitoring all of the destinations. And by that I mean, listen to your mixes in the car, off of your phone. You know, go to the stream and listen to it in your car. Listen to it on good headphones. Listen to it on a computer. Listen to it on a television if you have access to that. Listen to it on really junky headphones, like the little $2 earphones that you get when you ultimately lose your iPod earphones. You know, listen to it on that, because that's what everyone else is using. You want to be able to listen to that as it's being delivered to other people. And then as you listen, you make mental notes and go, well, this didn't sound so good on this, but it sounded better on this. And then try to gear your mixes to where it sounds equally good on everything.
Yeah, and that's a really common technique for professional sound engineers, you know, especially in the studio when you're mixing an album, mixing some songs. You know, if you see pictures of studios, you often see multiple sets of monitors, and yeah, the joke is always like, you go out to your car and listen to it in your car, right? Because that's going to be the system you hear probably the most familiar with. But yeah, listen to it on earbuds, you know, because how does it translate across multiple mediums? And then yeah, go back and make tweaks based off of your notes.
Yep. You know, another thing you can do is, and this is a little bit of a finer point, and you brought up ambience mics a little bit earlier. For me, having a large broadcast background, my goal in mixing for broadcast or streaming or whatever, you know, audio for picture, is to make it sound like it looks. Right. So you don't want to have like a large room and somebody talking and it sounds really present right up in your face. You want it to feel like you're in the room. Yeah. Conversely, you don't want it to be super ambient and you're hearing it almost sound like, you know, just a mic on a camera. Right. You know, you want it to sound present, but not overly done.
So what kind of mics do we use for ambient miking? When you were in your broadcast position, did you have multiple microphones? Did you have 1, 2? Did you use mics like they're using for the in-ears to repurpose for audience mics? How did you set yours up?
I personally prefer small diaphragm condensers. I've used large diaphragm condensers. I personally don't like them as much as small diaphragm. You know, we're talking pencil microphones.
Right,
people
sure.
would, you know, I like those, and at least 2, so I can pan them left and right. I don't use 1 if I can possibly get by with that.
Yeah, at our church we just have shotgun mics set up because they're up behind the stage and we're trying to get out into the audience more.
So you got the back of the mics facing the stage, right, and toward the audience.
So, and then, so the source and destination, so in between, you know, where the mixer and stuff is, you obviously have all the processing and fat channel stuff you can do. And one thing that I always recommend is, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, utilize the presets. We've got a lot of great presets in the mixer, and it gives you a good starting point of where to start with some of your EQ and your dynamic settings.
Yeah, our engineers, our software programmers, all those guys, Ray, have spent a lot of time, a lot of man hours ensuring that our presets sound good and they work good. They've done the math for you. So, you know, we've all painted ourselves into a box not knowing what we were doing with a certain type of, you know, effect processor, a dynamics processor. But it's already there in the box for you. So use what all these guys have created until you feel comfortable manipulating those parameters, you know, and start to customize it to your own. But until then, man, use our stuff.
Yeah. In fact, if you start with a preset for a particular musician on the stage, like a vocalist or guitar player, and you tweak it for how he's supposed to, you can actually save that in your little library and recall those presets every time that person's up again. You eliminated so much time wasted. So.
And the end result is going to be better sounding, better quality. And that's the goal. That's what we're after.
Amen. So that's it. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you learned a little bit more about how to make your audio sound better for your live stream, and be sure to check out PreSonus's website. We have tons of great videos, a lot especially good for volunteers at church who are manning their sound systems there. So hope to see you again in the near future. Have a good day.